Welcome back to the Substantiate podcast. I'm the host, William Glasser, back with another summer Q&A episode. So, just like I've been doing the last several weeks, just going on with more of these questions over from Poddex, and they've got all these amazing few questions that we're just going to be going with for this episode. So, just going through these, the first one here, what did your 15-year-old self think you would be doing today? So this one is really an easy one for me. I am not yet 15, so therefore my future self would be able to know what my past self, or in this sense, current self, would be doing. But if you turn that around and said, what would 7-year-old me think I'd be doing? Well, 7-year-old me would think that I'd be, probably about to go to summer camp and start high school next year. So that's about it in terms of that. All right, next question. If you could have anyone as a dinner guest, who would it be? So I'm gonna keep this with live people right now, and I would have to go with Michael Kay. He is the Yankees TV announcer, and he used to do radio. He still has a sports talk radio show on ESPN New York. He wrote a book called Center Stage, which is about his TV show, Center Stage, where he interviews famous celebrities. And I think because of all those interviews, he'd have really interesting stories and lots to say. But yeah, he's just an interesting guy, and if you listen to him for a long time, especially whether it's on Center Stage where he's with a different guest every episode, or if you listen to the Michael Kay show on the radio where it's him and two other guys, or doing Yankees games with a variety of other announcers, then his personality shows in a bunch of different ways, and he's a really interesting and complex person. Alright, next question. What is a device that you couldn't live without? So this one, I could live without any device really. I'm recording all of these episodes because I'm going to summer camp where there are no devices for 7 weeks. So I think that for a long period of time, such as 7 weeks, I could manage, but once you start taking it on to a year, then it gets more complicated. But at the same time, this question could be looked at in a few different ways. You could either say, okay, well, is it just that there's no cell phones, period? Right? And, I'm not missing out on anything. The world has moved on to adapt to, how things work without cell phones. Or is it that everyone else has it, but I don't? So I think if no one had it, then it would be much easier. And also with this, I'm assuming that in this hypothetical world, you would remember what the device was, though, because otherwise, like, people survive thousands and thousands and thousands of years before they knew what a computer was, right? So if you don't know about it, then I think you could survive for a really long time, but yeah, there's like all those different ways to look through it, and people have just been around for so long that you can just be yourself and be a society without needing one single thing. We don't rely on one single thing, unless you consider that like water and food, but I'm also going to turn a sports perspective on this. Let's say football. So I think instant replay is great for football. I mean, there's some things that are just blatantly stupid, like the PI or lack thereof in what was that, like the AFC Championship game a few years ago? Or maybe that was the NFC Championship game, I forget. I think it was the NFC. But just those things like that, and that's in every sport. They should be able to overturn those kinds of things where there shouldn't be rules about, okay, you can only review this call or that call. Well, if the call was wrong, then review it. And it seems kind of strange. And at the end of the day, how hard would it be that they have, other referees or other umpires in baseball or, in every sport to have an extra ref or two and have them look at the replays after every single play, make sure that it all went well, and have it sort of like at the last 2 minutes, I think it is, in the NBA, where every call gets reviewed, like that kind of thing, where, that way you can make sure that every call is right, because in today's age, it's just terrible to have a missed call like that. But without instant replay, the game would be so different, and more so in the sense of, right, instant replay was implemented gradually. It's not like one day they just started using it all the way. It's changed in each sport throughout the years over the last decade plus since it was first implemented. And I think that if you just cut it off immediately, it would be pretty weird. And I think you would also start to see some players trying to get away with things. You would start to see different things, like, for example, in baseball, the major way where a first base umpire tells if the runner is safe or out, he hears, do I hear the pop of the glove or the foot hitting the base first? And something like that, a player, whether it's the first baseman, or maybe the second baseman who's out of the way, try to create like a popping noise with a glove and all these different things that could try to get into the umpire's head. And, obviously that's kind of dirty playing, but, players will do anything to give themselves a competitive advantage. And I think that instant replay, though, is overall good for sports, but still very controversial. So that's going to wrap up this week's episode of the podcast. Come back next week, next Wednesday. More episodes like this. And yeah, so hopefully this will all get back to more hypothetical matchups sometime soon, but for the time being, I'm still away at camp. This is still a pre-recorded episode. So until then, see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Substantiate. The best way to help support the show is to, number one,
tell your friends about Substantiate. That is the number one way to support us. The second way is to leave us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. Number 3, follow us at SubstantiatePod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Hello, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
And we're hosts of Capes on the Couch, the podcast where comics get counseling.
Superheroes don't always get to go home happy. That's where we come in.
We offer psychiatric and mental health analysis of comic book characters.
So check us out at capesonthecouch.live and across all social media platforms at Capes on the Couch.